The Arizona sun did not merely shine, it hunted. It beat down on the red dirt and jagged mesas with a relentless, crushing weight, turning the air into a shimmering haze of heat that burned the lungs with every drawn breath. Wade had been riding through this blistering furnace for 6 days. At 24, the Texas cowboy had nothing left to his name but a dust-covered wool coat that felt too heavy for the desert, a pair of worn leather boots, and a horse that was rapidly losing its remaining strength. He unhooked the weathered canteen from his saddle horn and shook it. Nothing. Not even a hollow rattle of a stray drop. It had been empty for 2 days. His lips were split and bleeding, tasting of dried salt and iron. Every swallow felt like dragging sandpaper down his throat. The crude leather map he had bought in a border town was supposed to show a safe route to California, but it had proven to be nothing more than a swindler's lie. There were no trails here. There were no landmarks. There was only the vast, unforgiving expanse of the canyonlands, waiting to grind him into dust. Wade leaned forward, patting his gelding's sweat-stained neck. "Just a little further, boy," he rasped, his voice barely a cracked whisper. The horse stumbled, its hooves kicking up clouds of red powder, but it kept moving. Animals understood survival better than men did. Then, between a narrow gorge of towering redstone, a flash of silver caught the corner of Wade's eye. He blinked hard, convinced his mind was finally giving way to the heat. Mirage was a cruel trick of the desert, and he had seen plenty of phantom lakes in the past 48 hours. But his horse lifted its head, its ears flicking forward. Its pace quickened, finding a sudden surge of desperate energy. Animals didn't hallucinate the smell of water. It was real. Wade guided the horse through the narrow rock fissure, and the landscape abruptly shifted. The brutal reds and browns gave way to a hidden bend lined with lush, vibrant green brush. Cutting through the center of this secret oasis was a river, crystalline, fast-moving, and perfectly clear. It was a jewel hidden in the throat of the wasteland, untouched and impossibly beautiful. He didn't bother to check for tracks. He didn't look for territorial markers. The agonizing instinct of thirst overrode years of frontier caution. Wade slid from the saddle, his boots hitting the soft bank, and dropped to his knees at the water's edge. He cupped his trembling hands and brought the water to his face. It was freezing, sweet, and better than anything he had ever tasted. He drank greedily, the cold water spilling down his chin, washing away the grit and blood from his cracked lips. After letting his horse drink its fill, Wade stood up. The silence of the canyon was absolute, broken only by the murmur of the current. His dust-stained wool coat was stiff with sweat and dirt. Without thinking, he tossed his wide-brimmed hat onto the grassy bank. He didn't bother taking off his boots or his heavy coat. He just waded into the river. The water rose to his knees, then his waist. The biting cold was a shock to his system, but it was a merciful one. Wade closed his eyes, sinking down until the water rushed over his shoulders. For the first time in a week, the crushing weight of survival lifted. The ache in his bones dulled. He was alive. He wasn't going to die in the dirt. Click! The sound was faint, but in the stillness of the canyon, it might as well have been a gunshot. It was the unmistakable, sharp tension of a bowstring being drawn taut. Wade's eyes snapped open. The peace of the river vanished, replaced by a cold spike of adrenaline that rooted him to the riverbed. Standing on the high rocks above the banks, emerging from the brush and shadows as if they had materialized from the earth itself, were 20 Apache warriors. They formed a perfect, inescapable semicircle around the water. Every single one of them had a bow drawn, the flint tips of their arrows aimed directly at his chest. Wade slowly raised his hands, the river water dripping from the heavy wool of his sleeves. He didn't move toward his revolver. It was strapped to his saddle on the bank, hopelessly out of reach. He was completely, utterly vulnerable. "I don't want any trouble," Wade said, keeping his voice steady, speaking in Spanish, hoping they would understand. "I just needed water. My horse was dying. I'll leave right now." None of the warriors lowered their bows. They didn't speak. Their faces were painted with dust and fierce concentration. But as Wade looked closer, he saw something else in their eyes. It wasn't the cold detachment of men about to kill. It was a strange, tense curiosity. Some of them even exchanged fleeting, bewildered glances. From the center of the formation, the warriors parted respectfully. An older man stepped forward, descending the rocks with the effortless grace of someone who owned the land. He wore eagle feathers woven into his graying hair, and his face was deeply lined, carved by decades of sun and wind. His dark, amber eyes locked onto Wade with an authority that commanded absolute silence. "Step out of the water," the older man ordered in perfect, heavily accented Spanish. Wade didn't hesitate. He waded toward the bank, the soaked wool of his coat dragging him down, his boots squelching in the mud. He felt ridiculous, freezing, and acutely aware that his life hung by a thread. He stopped a few feet from the elder, keeping his hands visible. The man circled him slowly, studying him from head to toe, taking in the cheap clothes, the worn boots, the exhausted posture. "Do you have any idea where you just bathed, Cowboy?" the man asked, his voice low, echoing off the canyon walls. "No, sir," Wade replied. "I swear. I saw the water. If this is your land, I apologize." "This is the River of Promise," the man said. "I am Kuruk, chief of the Eagle River Apache, and by stepping into these waters, you have just fulfilled a 200-year-old tradition." Wade frowned, water dripping from his jaw. "Excuse me?" Chief Kuruk raised a hand. The warriors slowly lowered their bows, though they did not notch their arrows away. "Since the time of my grandfather's grandfather, this bend of the river has been forbidden to all men. It is a sacred place, preserved by the spirits of this valley. Only one man is permitted to bathe in these waters." Kuruk paused, his amber eyes narrowing. "The man destined to marry my daughter." The canyon seemed to spin. The rush of the water faded into a dull roar in Wade's ears. "Wait, no, you don't understand. It was an accident. I didn't know." "Fate does not make mistakes, and it does not care for your accidents." A new voice cut through the air, sharp and unyielding as a blade. From the line of warriors, a young woman stepped forward. She was tall, her posture radiating a fierce, untouchable pride. Her thick black hair was woven into a long braid, adorned with flashes of turquoise beads that caught the desert sun. She wore a beautifully crafted leather tunic, but it was the silver-inlaid ceremonial knife at her belt that caught Wade's attention. Her hand rested naturally on the hilt. Her black eyes locked onto Wade, and the sheer force of the hostility in her gaze made him take a half-step back. There was no curiosity in her expression, only pure, burning disdain. "Father," she said, her voice tight with suppressed rage, never looking away from Wade. "Look at him. He is a lost, soaked vagrant. He doesn't even know how to navigate the desert. Are you truly going to tell me that this cowboy is the man the river chose for me?" "Senna," Kuruk said patiently, though his tone brokered no argument. "The elders watched him from the high ridge. The whole village saw him enter. The tradition is fulfilled." "I didn't ask for this," Wade finally snapped, the exhaustion and fear boiling over into frustration. He pointed a dripping arm toward his horse. "Listen to me, miss. I don't want a wife. I don't want a bride. I just wanted a drink. I'll get on my horse, I'll ride west, and you will never see me again." "No one is going anywhere," Kuruk's voice boomed, silencing the canyon. He looked at Wade, his expression hardening into stone. "The last time our people ignored the decree of the river, the rains stopped for 3 years. We starved. I will not risk the survival of my tribe for the pride of my daughter or the ignorance of a stranger." Wade looked at the chief, then at Senna. She was gripping the hilt of her knife so tightly her knuckles were white. The air between them was electric with resentment. "You will come to our camp," Kuruk commanded. "The council will decide how we proceed. But know this, Cowboy. You belong to the valley now." Surrounded by 20 armed men, shivering in his wet clothes, Wade realized with a sinking dread that the vast, empty desert he had been fighting to survive had just snapped shut around him like a steel trap. The march through the canyon felt longer than the 6 days Wade had spent wandering the open desert. He rode his exhausted gelding, surrounded by a silent wall of Apache warriors. His dust-stained wool coat, soaked from the river, slowly began to bake in the returning heat, turning stiff and smelling of riverweed and old sweat. He had managed to hook his weathered canteen back onto his saddle, though it remained completely empty. Ahead of him rode Senna. Her back was rigidly straight, her thick braid with its turquoise beads swaying rhythmically with her horse's steady gait. Not once did she turn to look at him, but Wade could feel the heat of her anger radiating like a physical force. Her hand never strayed far from the silver-inlaid ceremonial knife at her belt. Wade kept his eyes forward, his mind working furiously. He was a pragmatic man. He knew how to break wild horses, how to read weather, and how to survive with nothing. But there was no protocol for being forced into a 200-year-old marital prophecy at Arrow Point. After an hour of winding through a maze of jagged rock formations, the narrow gorge abruptly opened. Wade's breath hitched. Hidden from the rest of the world by towering sheer walls of redstone, lay a vast, verdant valley. It was a fortress built by the earth itself. Dozens of hide tents were scattered across the valley floor, fires smoking lazily into the clear sky. Children were running, women were grinding corn, and horses, magnificent, well-fed animals, were grazing in the distance. Wade realized instantly that a man could search the Arizona territory for a lifetime and never find this place unless he was led to it. As the hunting party entered the camp, the valley fell utterly silent. Women paused with their grinding stones suspended. Elders stepped out from the shadows of their tents. Children froze in their tracks. Hundreds of dark eyes turned to lock onto the stranger in their midst. Wade sat rigidly in his saddle, acutely aware of his disheveled state. He felt the heavy, suffocating weight of being an intruder, a walking omen brought into their sacred sanctuary. Kuruk led the procession to the center of the camp, an open space marked by a massive circle of stones. He raised a hand, signaling the warriors to halt. Wade was ordered to dismount. His boots hit the dusty earth, the wet leather squelching softly. "People of the Eagle River," Kuruk's voice boomed, carrying easily across the hushed crowd. "Today, the spirits of the canyon have spoken. A man has entered the River of Promise." A collective murmur swept through the tribe. An old woman near the front covered her mouth, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and trepidation. Several younger warriors exchanged dark, skeptical looks. "He is a stranger," Kuruk continued, gesturing toward Wade, who stood awkwardly under the punishing weight of their stares. A cowboy from the eastern plains. He knew nothing of our ways, but the elders on the ridge bore witness. The waters accepted him. The ancient tradition is fulfilled. "It is a mistake!" Senna's voice shattered the reverence of the moment. She stepped into the center of the stone circle, placing herself between Wade and her father. Her black eyes were blazing, her chin raised in defiance. To the tribe, she was their greatest tracker, a warrior in her own right. To be handed over to a soaked, lost vagrant was an insult she would not swallow in silence. "Look at him, father," Senna demanded, gesturing sharply at Wade. "He is weak from the trail. He carries an empty canteen and rides a dying horse. You cannot bind my life and the future of this tribe to a man who stumbled into our sacred waters by sheer, clumsy accident. Ident. I am not a piece of property to be traded to the desert's leftovers." A tense silence gripped the stone circle. Wade saw the conflicted expressions on the faces of the elders. He stepped forward, his stiff coat pulling at his shoulders. "She's right," Wade said, his Spanish rough but clear enough for the crowd to hear. "I don't belong here. I meant no disrespect to your river, but I'm just a man trying to get to California. I don't want to force this woman into anything." Kuruk's amber eyes hardened. "You do not understand the burden of the river, cowboy. 20 years ago, a man was chosen by the waters, and he fled in the night. For 3 years the rains did not come. The earth cracked. Our children grew thin and quiet. I will not allow my daughter's pride or your ignorance to bring that curse upon us again." Kuruk turned to the elders. "The council will meet at dawn to formalize the bond. Until then, the stranger is our guest. Treat him with the respect the river demands." He dismissed the gathering with a wave. Senna cast one last, venomous look at Wade before turning on her heel and vanishing into the crowd. Wade was escorted by 2 silent warriors to a small hide tent near the edge of the camp. They gestured for him to enter, taking up guard positions outside the flap. Wade ducked inside. The space was small, smelling of dried sage and old leather. Furs were piled in the corner. He sank onto them, exhausted, pulling off his damp boots with a groove. And an hour later, the tent flap opened. An elderly woman with a face mapped by deep wrinkles entered silently. She carried a wooden bowl of venison stew, a stack of warm corn tortillas, and a jug of fresh water. She set them down near Wade, her dark eyes studying him intently, searching for whatever the river had seen in him. "Thank you," Wade muttered. She nodded once, a brief flicker of sympathy in her gaze, and left. Wade ate mechanically, his body desperately soaking up the nourishment. When he finished, the walls of the small tent felt too tight. He needed air. He pushed past the flap. The guards watched him, but did not stop him as he walked toward the perimeter of the camp. The sun was beginning to set, bleeding violent streaks of orange and purple across the sky. Wade climbed a short, rocky outcrop at the edge of the valley, seeking a moment of quiet. He wasn't alone. Senna was sitting on the highest boulder, her silhouette sharp against the dying light. Her hands were resting on her knees, her posture rigid. She heard his boots on the stone, but didn't turn around. "Is there anywhere in this valley I can go without finding you?" she asked, her voice devoid of its earlier fire, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Wade stopped a few feet away, keeping a respectful distance. "It's a free desert, as far as I know. But if you want me to leave, I'll go back to my tent." Senna finally looked at him over her shoulder. The dying light caught the turquoise beads in her hair. "For 23 years, I have lived with a shadow over my head," she said quietly. Every time a stranger came near our lands, every time an alliance was discussed, the elders watched the river. I learned to track better than any man. I learned to hunt. I made myself indispensable to my father, hoping he would realize I was worth more than an ancient prophecy. She looked back at the horizon. And then a dirty, half-dead cowboy falls into a creek, and my life is no longer my own. Wade walked up and sat on a nearby rock, letting the cool evening wind hit his face. "I'm sorry," he said honestly. "I really am. I don't like being a prisoner any more than you like being a prize. But I'll tell you this, I've survived this long by not making promises I can't keep. I won't pretend to be your husband." Senna's black eyes shifted to him, studying his face, looking past the dirt and the sunburn. For the first time, she didn't see an intruder. She saw a man trapped in the same snare she was. "Tomorrow, the council will meet," Senna said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But my father is hiding something. There is a reason he is so desperate to secure this prophecy quickly. Something is coming to the valley, Cowboy, and I fear your bad luck has only just begun." Wade touched the weathered canteen at his side, looking out into the darkening desert. He had found water, but he was starting to realize he was about to drown in something far worse. The desert before dawn was a freezing, color-drained world. The crushing heat of the previous day had vanished, replaced by a biting cold that seeped through the canvas of the small hide tent. Wade woke with a shiver, pulling his stiff, dust-stained wool coat tighter around his shoulders. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the sharp snap of bowstrings and saw Senna's furious black eyes. When the first thin slice of grey light pierced the tent flap, the same elderly woman returned. This time, she brought a steaming cup of bitter herbal tea. Wade drank it in silence, letting the heat thaw his chest. He strapped on his gun belt, which had been surprisingly returned to him, and hooked his weathered canteen over his shoulder. The canteen was empty, a quiet reminder of how close he had come to dying out there. 2 warriors waited outside. They didn't speak, only gestured for him to follow. The camp was already alive, though the mood was heavy, stripped of the usual morning chatter. The smell of wood smoke and roasting corn hung in the frigid air. Wade was led back to the massive stone circle in the center of the valley. The council of elders sat in a wide semicircle on woven blankets. Chief Kuruk sat in the center, his face an impenetrable mask of weathered lines. To his left stood Senna. She wore the same fine leather tunic, the turquoise beads in her thick braid catching the pale morning light. Her hand rested instinctively on the hilt of her silver-inlaid KN. Ife. She looked at Wade not as a man, but as a complication. Dozens of tribe members gathered around the perimeter, their breaths pluming in the cold air. "Step forward, Wade of Texas," Kuruk ordered, his voice resonant in the quiet canyon. Wade walked into the center of the circle. He stood tall, despite the exhaustion dragging at his bones. He was a cowboy, used to harsh judgments from hard men. He met Kuruk's amber eyes without flinching. The oldest of the elders, a man whose face was furrowed by 80 winters, spoke first. "The river of promise has not been disturbed in my lifetime. The waters accepted this stranger. Our laws are clear. He must be bound to the chief's bloodline to preserve the valley's grace." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the older members of the crowd. Kuruk raised a scarred hand, and the murmurs died instantly. "The river has spoken," the chief said slowly. "But the river does not fight men with rifles, and our valley faces a threat that ancient traditions alone cannot defeat." Senna's posture stiffened. She stepped forward, her voice clear and carrying an edge of cold steel. 3 nights ago, she said, our scouts found tracks on the northern ridge. Not wild animals, shod horses, heavy boots. They belonged to Marcus the Crow. Wade frowned, recognizing the name from whispers in Bordertown Salou. Marcus the Crow was a half-Mexican, half-French outlaw, a ruthless predator who ran a gang of 15 heavily armed men. They were known for slaughtering isolated homesteaders and vanishing back into the canyonlands before the law could even mount a posse. They aren't here for our land, Kuruk continued, his tone grim. They are here for our horses. For 4 generations, the Eagle River Apache have bred the fastest, strongest horses in the territory. Marcus knows this. He intends to steal the herd and sell them south of the border. And to ensure no one tracks him, he intends to wipe this camp from the face of the earth. Wade looked around the circle. He saw the faces of the children clinging to their mothers' skirts, the elders who could no longer draw a bow, the warriors who were brave but severely outnumbered by outlaws armed with repeating rifles. We have fought off raiding parties before, Senna said, her chin raised. But Marcus has gathered too many men. If they attack the valley in force, we will drown in our own blood. She turned directly to Wade, the hostility in her gaze shifting into a hard, calculating pragmatism. My father believes your arrival is destiny. I believe it is a tactical advantage. An advantage? Wade asked, his voice rough. You are a white man, Senna stated bluntly. A Texas cowboy. You can ride into Red Rock, the nearest settlement, without being shot on sight. You can walk into their stores, buy the heavy ammunition we are forbidden to purchase, and speak to the sheriff. You can navigate their world, just as I navigate these canyons. Wade slowly exhaled, the mist of his breath swirling in the cold air. The puzzle pieces snapped together. The forced marriage, the desperation of the chief, the sudden willingness to let a stranger into their most sacred sanctuary. It wasn't just a blind adherence to a 200-year-old law. It was a desperate grasp for survival. So, I'm not just a groom, Wade said, a dry, humorless smile touching the corner of his cracked lips. I'm a shield, an errand boy to fetch your bullets and play politics with a corrupt town. You are a man who owes us his life, Kuruk said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. My warriors could have let you drown in the river. They could have filled you with arrows for defiling our sacred waters. We gave you mercy. Now, I ask if you have the honor to repay it. Wade looked at his weathered canteen. He thought about the map in his pocket, the empty promise of California. He had no family waiting for him, no ranch to call his own. He had spent his whole life drifting, a ghost on the frontier. Now, standing in a valley hidden from the world, surrounded by people who were facing total annihilation, he felt a strange, heavy anchor drop in his chest. He looked at Senna. She wasn't pleading. Her pride would never allow it. But beneath the fierce exterior, in the slight tightening of her jaw, Wade saw the quiet, desperate fear of a woman watching her world stand on the edge of a cliff. I don't know anything about being a husband, Wade said, his voice steady, carrying to every ear in the circle. And I don't believe much in fate. But I know how to handle outlaws. And I know horses. He stepped closer to the chief, the dust falling from his heavy coat. If I do this, if I ride to Red Rock and help you fortify this valley, I do it on my terms. I make the tactical calls outside this camp. And when this is over, no one forces this woman to share a fire with me if she doesn't want to. Senna's eyes widened a fraction, a flash of genuine surprise breaking her stoic mask. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. not as a burden, but as a man of his word. The ancient elder nodded slowly. Kurik's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, the crushing weight of leadership easing just slightly. Agreed, Wade of Texas. Wade turned to Senna. You said they want your horses. If I'm going to risk my neck against Marcus the Crow, I need to know exactly what we're protecting. Senna held his gaze for a long moment, the air between them shifting from hostility to a fragile, dangerous alliance. She dropped her hand from the hilt of her silver-inlaid knife. "Follow me, cowboy," she said, turning towards the northern ridge. "I will show you out treasure." The walk to the northern edge of the valley was quiet, the heavy tension of the council meeting slowly giving way to the practical reality of impending war. Wade walked half a pace behind Senna, his heavy, dust-stained wool coat catching the rising desert breeze. The sun was climbing higher, baking the chill from the red stone walls and turning the canyon floor into a furnace once again, but Wade hardly felt it. His mind was calculating distances, angles and choke points. They reached a natural amphitheatre at the far end of the camp. Towering rock formations curved inward, creating a massive, naturally fortified corral. A simple, sturdy fence of lashed pine poles closed the only gap. Wade stopped dead in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. Grazing peacefully in the shade of the canyon walls were 30 of the most magnificent horses he had ever laid eyes on. They were a masterpiece of selective breeding, deep-chested, long-legged animals with coats that gleamed like polished copper, obsidian and silver. Even from a distance, Wade could see the raw power and high intelligence in the way they moved. He had spent his entire life in the saddle, breaking mustangs and driving cattle across the plains, but these animals were in a league entirely their own. Senna leaned her forearms against the top rail of the fence, watching his reaction. The harshness in her black eyes softened into a fierce, protective pride. "My great-grandfather started this line," she said softly, the turquoise beads in her hair clicking as the wind caught her braid. "He brought 2 exceptional wild horses down from the high Sierras. For 4 generations, we have bred them for speed, endurance, and heart. They can cross the desert on half the water a normal horse needs, and they can outrun a storm." Wade approached the fence slowly, not wanting to spook the herd. A large, ink-black stallion with a white star on its forehead lifted its head, ears swiveling forward. It trotted over to the fence, sniffing the air. Wade reached out, offering the back of his hand. The stallion snorted, then pressed its velvet muzzle against Wade's rough knuckles. "He likes you," Senna noted, a hint of genuine surprise in her voice. "He usually bites strangers." "Animals know when you're too tired to be a threat," Wade muttered, stroking the stallion's powerful neck. He looked back at Senna, his expression turning grim. "No wonder Marcus the Crow wants them. A herd like this would fetch a fortune down in Mexico. Enough to buy an army." "And that is why we cannot simply run," Senna replied, her tone hardening. She drew her silver-inlaid ceremonial knife from her belt and knelt in the dust, using the blade to carve a rough map of the valley. "This is the main canyon entrance. It is the only way in or out that is wide enough to move 30 horses. If Marcus comes, he will bring his men through here, hoping to trap us against the back walls." Wade crouched beside her, ignoring the ache in his knees. He studied the lines drawn in the red dirt. If he has 15 men with repeating rifles, he won't just charge in. Marcus is ruthless, but he isn't stupid. He'll send a scouting party first. Then he'll position snipers on the high ridges to pin your warriors down, while the rest of his gang breaks the corral and drives the horses out. Senna looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "You sound as if you have ridden with outlaws." "I haven't," Wade said flatly. but I've survived them. Outlaws are cowards at heart. They rely on overwhelming force and terror. If we take away their high ground, we take away their advantage. He pointed to the ridges Senna had drawn. You know these rocks better than anyone. Can you get your archers up there before Marcus takes the positions? I can, Senna nodded, tracing a hidden goat path with the tip of her knife. But arrows cannot match the range of Winchester rifles. If they see us first, we will be slaughtered. That's why they aren't going to see you, Wade said, his mind working furiously. We need to create a bottleneck. We need to make them think the horses are unguarded, draw them deep into the canyon, and hit them from the blind spots. But to do that, I need supplies you don't have. I need heavy-gauge wire to trip their horses in the dark, blasting powder to seal the rear exits, and enough ammunition to hold the line. He stood up, brushing the red dust from his coat. I need to go to Red Rock. Senna stood up as well, sliding her knife back into its sheath. Red Rock is a snake pit. The sheriff is on Marcus's payroll, and the town turns a blind eye to the bloodshed as long as the gold flows into their saloons. If a stranger rides in asking questions about Marcus the Crow, you won't make it out alive. I'm a white man in a dusty coat, Wade countered. To them, I'm just another drifter passing through. I know how to talk in a saloon without saying anything at all. It's a risk, but staying here and waiting to be butchered is a guarantee. Senna stared at him for a long, silent moment. The wind howled softly through the canyon. Finally, she nodded. I will prepare a horse. An hour later, Wade stood near the edge of the camp, adjusting the cinch on a beautiful caramel-coloured mare named Windfast. Senna had chosen her specifically for her speed, warning Wade that if things went wrong, he needed to trust the horse to outrun the bullets. As Wade finished tightening the saddle, he noticed a shift in the atmosphere of the camp. The tribe members who had stared at him with suspicion the day before were now approaching quietly. The elderly woman who had brought him food stepped forward, pressing a tightly wrapped bundle of dried meat and flatbread into his hands. A young warrior with a jagged scar across his cheek handed Wade a small leather pouch filled with extra lead balls for his revolver. They didn't speak, but the message was overwhelmingly clear. He was no longer the intruder who had defiled their sacred river. He was their shield. Chief Kuruk walked up to the mare, his face unreadable. He reached out and tapped the heavy, weathered canteen hanging from Wade's saddle. Wade realized the chief had ordered it filled to the brim with the cold, sweet water from the River of Promise. A man who rides for his family does not ride alone, Wade of Texas, Kuruk said solemnly. Return to us. Wade swallowed the sudden lump in his throat. He had never belonged anywhere. He had never had a home to fight for. Now, the weight of a people's survival rested squarely on his shoulders. He swung up into the saddle. Senna stepped up to the mare, resting her hand on the bridle. She looked up at him, her dark eyes entirely stripped of their previous hostility. In its place was a quiet, desperate trust. Don't die out there, cowboy, Senna said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. If you lose my father's best horse, I will track you to the afterlife myself. A genuine, exhausted smile cracked Wade's lips. I'll be back before sunset tomorrow, Senna. Keep the high ground secure. With a gentle click of his tongue, Wade turned the mare and spurred her into a fast trot. As he rode out through the towering red stone gates, leaving the hidden sanctuary behind, he touched his heavy canteen. He was riding straight into the jaws of a corrupt town. But for the first time in his life, Wade knew exactly where he was supposed to be. The 6-hour ride to Red Rock was a brutal reintroduction to the hellish reality of the Arizona Territory. Outside the protected embrace of the hidden canyon, the temperature soared, baking the earth until it cracked. Wade's dust-stained wool coat felt like a lead blanket across his shoulders, but he kept it on, knowing the thick fabric was the only thing keeping the sun from blistering his skin. Beneath him, Windfast moved with an effortless, ground-eating stride. Senna had not exaggerated. The caramel-coloured mare possessed a stamina that defied the harsh environment. When Wade finally crested the last ridge, the town of Red Rock appeared through the shimmering heat haze. It was exactly as he expected, an ugly scar of weathered timber and canvas tents clinging to the edge of a dry riverbed. There was no law here, only survival, and the men who profited from it. Wade pulled his wide-brimmed hat low over his eyes and nudged the mare forward. Dirt. The main street was a wide strip of packed dirt, lined with a saloon, a general mercantile, an assayer's office, and a livery stable. Eyes tracked his every movement as he rode in. The men loitering on the boardwalks, hard-eyed drifters, miners in hired guns, stopped talking. They didn't look at Wade. They looked at Windfast. A horse of her caliber was a rare prize in this desolate country, and in a town like Red Rock, men had been killed for much less. Wade dismounted in front of the mercantile, tying the mare securely to the hitching post. He unhooked his weathered canteen, taking a slow sip of the cool, sweet water from the River of Promise. It tasted like salvation. He looped it over his shoulder, adjusted his heavy coat to ensure the grip of his revolver was easily accessible, and stepped onto the creaking wooden boardwalk. The interior of the mercantile was dim, smelling strongly of raw tobacco, coffee beans, and gun oil. A balding man with wire-rimmed glasses stood behind a long wooden counter. He looked Wade up and down, taking in the dust, the exhaustion, and the worn boots. "Help you, friend?" the clerk asked, his tone cautious. "Needs supplies," Wade said, his voice a dry rasp. "Heavy-gauge fencing wire, 3 spools, half a dozen sticks of blasting powder, fuses, and all the .44 caliber ammunition you have behind that counter." The clerk's eyebrows crawled upward. "Road." He leaned his forearms on the wood, glancing nervously toward the saloon across the street. "That's a lot of firepower for a man traveling alone. You planning on starting a war, cowboy?" "Planning on sinking a mine shaft," Wade lied smoothly, tossing a heavy gold coin onto the counter. It was part of the meager savings he had meant to use to start his life in California. "The wire is for the perimeter. I don't like coyotes sniffing around my claim." The clerk stared at the gold, then quickly swept it off the counter. "Whatever you say. I'll get it from the back." While the clerk loaded a heavy burlap sack with the supplies, Wade moved toward the front window, peering through the dusty glass. 2 men had stepped out of the saloon. They wore heavy dusters and carried repeating rifles slung casually over their shoulders. One of them, a thick-necked man with a jagged scar across his throat, was staring intensely at Windfast. "Those men out there," Wade said without turning around. "They ride from Marcus the Crow?" The clerk froze, a box of cartridges slipping from his fingers to clatter against the wood. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, his face pale. "You don't say that name out loud in Red Rock. The sheriff is drinking with his lieutenant right now in the back room of the saloon. They own this town." "Are they moving out?" Wade asked, keeping his eyes on the men outside. "Tonight," the clerk whispered, frantically tying the burlap sack. "I heard them bragging. Said they're heading north to the Redstone Canny." Nons bragged about a prize of 30 prime horses and a valley they're going to burn to ash. "Now, take your supplies and get out of here before they decide they want your horse too." Wade hoisted the heavy sack over his shoulder. The timeline was tighter than he thought. Marcus wasn't waiting. But Wade had one more stop to make. He stepped out of the mercantile, ignoring the lingering stares of the outlaws, and walked 3 doors down to the Assayer and Land Registry office. He pushed the door open. A bored-looking official looked up from a stack of ledgers. Wade walked straight to the desk, pulled his crude leather map from his inside coat pocket, and smoothed it out on the wood. He pointed to the exact coordinates of the hidden valley. "I want to register a land claim," Wade said. "This valley. The water rights, the grazing rights, everything." The official frowned, tapping a pen against his chin. "That's deep in the canyon lands. Nothing out there but Apache territory and dead men." "It's mine to claim," Wade stated, pulling out the last of his money, every crumpled bill, every silver dollar he possessed. He laid it on the desk. "I want the deed drawn up immediately." The official eyed the money, shrugged, and pulled out an official federal land contract. "Whatever you want, cowboy. What name do I put on the deed?" "Why?" "Ours." Wade looked at the map, thinking of the magnificent horses, the quiet strength of Chief Kuruk, and the fierce, unyielding pride in Senna's black eyes. He thought of a people who had been hunted for generations, constantly at the mercy of outlaws and corrupt laws. If Marcus the Crow was defeated, someone else would eventually come, unless the law of the white man protected them. "No," Wade said softly. "Register it under the Eagle River Apache tribe. Make it an irrevocable trust." The official stopped writing, staring at Wade as if he had lost his mind. "You're spending your life savings to buy land for Indians." "Just write," Wade commanded, his voice cold enough to freeze water. 10 minutes later, Wade walked out of the office, the freshly stamped federal deed folded securely inside his coat pocket. He moved quickly to Windfast, tying the heavy burlap sack behind the saddle. "Mighty fine animal," a gravelly voice said. Wade turned. The thick-necked outlaw with the scar was standing on the edge of the boardwalk, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. His eyes were crawling over the caramel mare. "I'll give you $20 for her." "She's not for sale," Wade said, untying the reins smoothly, ensuring his own body blocked the outlaw's clear line of sight to the mare's head. "Wasn't a request, Drifter," the outlaw sneered, taking a step into the dirt street. "Marcus is gathering a remuda tonight. I think this mare would look real good leading it." Wade didn't flinch. He did not blink. He just stared into the outlaw's eyes with a cold, dead calm that he had learned from a lifetime of surviving men just like this. He let his coat fall back just enough to reveal the worn, oiled grip of his Colt revolver. "I said," Wade repeated, his voice low and devoid of any fear, "she is not for sale. But if you want to try and take her, you better unholster that iron right now, because I won't miss." The outlaw paused, his eyes flicking to Wade's hand, hovering inches from the Colt. He weighed the odds. Dying in the dirt over one horse right before a major raid wasn't worth it. The outlaw spat in the dust and took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Suit yourself, dead man." Wade swung up into the saddle. He didn't look back as he spurred Windfast into a gallop, tearing out of red rock. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, bloody shadows across the desert. Marcus the Crow was mobilizing. The outlaws were coming for the valley tonight. Wade leaned low over the mare's neck, the heavy sack of supplies beating against the saddle, the precious deed burning a hole in his pocket. He had the powder. He had the plan. Now, he just had to beat the devil back to the River of Promise. The moon was a sharp silver crescent hanging over the jagged peaks when Windfast finally galloped through the hidden canyon gates. The mare was lathered in sweat, her chest heaving, but she had not faltered. Once, Wade was practically numb, his dust-stained wool coat stiff with dried sweat and the freezing night air, but his mind was razor-sharp. The camp was not asleep. Fires burned low, and warriors were armed, pacing the perimeter with restless energy. The moment Wade rode into the firelight, Senna was there. She caught Windfast's bridle, her dark eyes scanning Wade's exhausted face before dropping to the heavy burlap sack tied behind his saddle. "You didn't lose the horse," she said, her voice tight with a relief she refused to fully show. "She's a good girl," Wade rasped, sliding down from the saddle. His legs nearly buckled, but he caught himself against the stirrup. He looked past Senna to Chief Kuruk, who was emerging from the shadows of the council tent. "They're coming. Marcus the Crow is gathering his men tonight. They will hit the valley by dawn." The camp went utterly still. The reality of the impending violence settled over the tribe like a suffocating blanket. "Then we have no time," Kuruk said, his amber eyes narrowing. "We have enough," Wade replied, unstrapping the burlap sack. The heavy clanking of wire and powder echoed in the quiet. "Senna, get your strongest warriors. We are going to string this canyon so tight a jackrabbit couldn't run through it without breaking its legs." For the next 4 hours, the northern entrance of the valley became a silent hive of desperate labor. Wade and Senna worked side by side in the freezing arc. Wade showed the warriors how to string the heavy-gauge wire shin-high across the narrowest choke points of the canyon, anchoring it securely to the redstone walls. In the pitch black, the wire was completely invisible. Next, he climbed the rock faces, wedging the sticks of blasting powder into deep fissures above the trail, running the long fuses down to the hidden positions where Senna's archers would lie in wait. As they worked, the hostility that had marked their first meeting dissolved completely. They communicated in short, efficient gestures. When Wade's hands, cracked and bleeding from the wire, fumbled with a knot, Senna's deft fingers stepped in to secure it. When she slipped on the loose shale, his hand shot out, catching her arm and pulling her back to safety. There were no romantic words, only the profound, silent intimacy of two people fighting for the same exact breath of survival. By the time the eastern sky began to bleed into a pale, bruised purple, the traps were set. They returned to the main camp to wash the dust and blood from their hands. Wade was reloading the cylinders of his Colt revolver when Chief Kuruk approached him. The elder's face was solemn, painted with the ceremonial ash of a tribe preparing for war. "The sun is rising," Kuruk said quietly. "Before the outlaws arrive, before blood is spilled on this earth, the council requires the circle to be closed. The union ceremony must take place." Wade looked up, pausing with a lead ball in his fingers. "Chief, we are about to be in a firefight. A wedding won't stop Marcus's bullets." "No," Kuruk agreed, his voice a steady rumble. "But it will tell the spirits of this valley that we stand as one. If we are to fight, we fight as family. It gives my warriors strength to know the river's promise is fulfilled." Wade didn't argue. He understood the power of belief. He holstered his weapon, brushed the worst of the dirt from his heavy coat, and walked toward the center of the camp. The tribe was already gathered around the massive stone circle. The mood was not joyous. It was fierce, reverent, and heavy with impending battle. Senna stood waiting in the center. She had not changed her clothes. She still wore her fine leather tunic, the turquoise beads in her hair catching the first weak rays of the morning sun. But she had painted a single streak of black ash across her cheekbones. She looked like a warrior queen, defiant and beautiful. Wade stepped into the circle, standing across from her. The oldest elder spoke, his voice carrying a haunting, melodic cadence as he chanted in the Apache tongue. He held a burning bundle of sage, letting the fragrant smoke drift between Wade and Senna. Kuruk stepped forward, translating the final vow. Two rivers converge to make a stronger current. Today, the stranger becomes the shield. The daughter becomes the anchor. You are bound not just by the waters, but by the earth you stand upon. Kuruk looked at them both. Exchange your tokens of faith. Senna reached to her belt. She unclasped the silver-inlaid ceremonial knife, the weapon she had gripped so tightly when she first looked at Wade with hatred. She held it out to him, placing it flat across her palms. "This belonged to my grandfather," Senna said, her black eyes locked onto his, completely open and vulnerable for the first time. "It was meant to protect this valley. I give it to the man who fights for a home he does not own. May it keep you safe today." Wade took the knife, feeling the cool, heavy silver against his calloused palm. He slid it carefully into his own belt. He took a deep breath, the cold desert air filling his lungs. "I told you yesterday I didn't have much to offer," Wade said, his voice steady. "I'm just a drifter who drank from the wrong river. But I don't want to fight for a home I don't own. I want to fight for a home that belongs to you." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out the rolled federal deed and the leather map. He handed them to Senna. She unrolled the papers, frowning as she looked at the official seals and the tight cursive writing of the Red Rock assayer. Kuruk stepped closer, peering at the documents. "I registered this valley in Red Rock last night," Wade explained, addressing both Senna and the chief. "I used everything I had to buy the federal title. It is an irrevocable track. This land, the water rights, the grazing rights, it legally belongs to the Eagle River Apache tribe. No sheriff, no land grabber, and no outlaw can ever legally take this from you. It's yours, forever."
We're brothers now.
A stunned silence fell over the stone circle. The wind seemed to stop. Senna stared at the deed, the reality of what Wade had done crashing over her. He hadn't just bought bullets, he had bought their future. He had used his own escape money to anchor himself to their survival. She looked up at him, her dark eyes shining with unshed tears. The fierce tracker, the proud daughter who refused to bend, finally let her guard drop completely. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Senna stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, burying her face against the rough, dusty wool of his coat. Wade hesitated for a fraction of a second before his arms came up, holding her close, feeling the solid, living warmth of her against the freezing morning. It wasn't just a tradition anymore. It was real. But the desert rarely allowed peace to linger. A sharp, piercing whistle echoed down from the high northern ridge. The scouts. Senna pulled back instantly, the tears vanishing, replaced by the lethal focus of a warrior. Wade's hand dropped to his Colt. Marcus the Crow had arrived. The shrill whistle of the scout shattered the quiet reverence of the morning. In an instant, the stone circle emptied. The Eagle River Apache did not panic. They moved with the lethal, silent precision of a people who had survived in the harsh canyon lands for generations. Wade drew his Colt, the heavy iron familiar and steady in his grip. He looked at Senna. The tears were gone, replaced by the fierce, calculating gaze of a warrior protecting her home. She touched the hilt of the silver knife at her belt, gave him a single, sharp nod, and vanished into the shadows of the rock face, leading her archers up the hidden goat paths to the high ridges. Wade sprinted toward the northern bottleneck, taking his position behind a massive boulder near the corrals. The magnificent horses were shifting nervously in the dawn light, sensing the approaching violence. The sound came first, the heavy, rhythmic thud of shod hooves pounding against the packed dirt of the canyon trail, mixed with the jingle of spurs and the cocking of repeating rifles. Then they appeared. 15 men riding hard through the morning mist, dust billowing behind them. Leading the pack was Marcus the Crow. He wore a long black duster, a Winchester rifle resting easily across his saddle, his face twisted into a confident, predatory sneer. He expected a sleeping camp. He expected easy slaughter. He didn't notice the absence of guards. He didn't notice the unnatural silence. And in the dim, shadowed light of the canyon floor, he completely missed the thick, heavy-gauge wire strung knee-high across the narrowest point of the pass. The front line of outlaws hit the wire at a full gallop. It was a chaotic, spectacular collision. 3 horses pitched forward, screaming as their legs were swept out from under them, sending their riders tumbling violently into the red dirt. The outlaws behind them pulled hard on their reins, their mounts rearing and plunging in a desperate attempt to avoid the pile-up. The arrogant charge disintegrated in seconds into a tangle of shouting men and panicked animals. "Now!" Wade yelled, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. From the high ridges, Senna's archers unleashed hell. They didn't aim to kill the horses. They aimed for the riders struggling in the dirt. A rain of flint-tipped arrows pinned the outlaws behind their fallen saddles. Marcus the Crow snarled, kicking his horse clear of the wire trap. He raised his Winchester, searching the cliffs for a target. "Fire at the ridges! Tear them down!" he roared. Before his men could raise their rifles, Wade ignited the fuse on a short stick of blasting powder, waiting 2 agonizing seconds before hurling it high into the rock fissure above the trail behind the outlaws. The explosion was deafening. It wasn't meant to kill, but the shockwave shattered the fragile shale overhang. A massive cascade of red rock and dust rained down, completely sealing the narrow pass behind the gang. The outlaw's horse is bolted in terror. Marcus the Crow and his men were trapped in the bottleneck, pinned between a rock fall, a barricade of wire, and a rain of arrows from the sky. Wade stepped out from the boulder, leveling his Colt. He provided covering fire, the heavy .44 caliber rounds keeping the outlaws' heads down, preventing them from taking aim at Senna's archers. Every time an outlaw tried to flank the corral, Wade's precise, rhythmic firing drove them back. Desperate and furious, Marcus spotted Wade in the dust. The outlaw leader spurred his horse forward, swinging his rifle directly toward Wade's chest. Wade fanned the hammer of his Colt, but the cylinder clicked empty. He had fired his last round. Marcus bared his teeth, his finger tightening on the trigger. A silver flash cut through the morning air. Senna had descended the lower rocks with terrifying speed. She didn't use an arrow. She threw a heavy, fist-sized river stone with lethal accuracy, striking Marcus square in the temple. The outlaw's rifle discharged wildly into the dirt as he slumped sideways, falling heavily from his saddle. Seeing their leader fall, the remaining outlaws lost whatever courage they had left. Several threw their rifles into the dirt, raising their hands in surrender. Others scrambled desperately over the rockfall, fleeing on foot into the unforgiving desert, where the harsh sun would do the work the bullets had not. The canyon fell silent, save for the nervous snorting of the horses and the settling dust. Wade stood by the boulder, lowering his empty revolver. His chest heaved, his breathing ragged. Through the haze of gun smoke and red dirt, Senna walked toward him. She stopped a few feet away, her chest rising and falling in time with his. The streak of black ash on her face was smudged, but her dark eyes were shining with a brilliant, fierce light. "You didn't run," she said, her voice soft but carrying clearly in the quiet aftermath. "I told you," Wade replied, a tired, genuine smile breaking across his cracked lips. "I don't make promises I can't keep." Chief Kuruk emerged from the settling dust, flanked by his warriors. The elder looked at the surrendered outlaws, then at the magnificent herd of horses, completely untouched in the corrals. Finally, his amber eyes settled on Wade. The chief stepped forward and placed a heavy, scarred hand on Wade's shoulder. "The river chose a drifter," Kuruk said, his voice thick with emotion. "But today, the valley welcomes the sun." By the time evening fell, the camp was transformed. The captured outlaws had been bound and sent walking toward Red Rock under heavy guard to face the federal marshal. The Redstone Valley, now officially and legally the property of the Eagle River Apache, echoed with the sounds of a true celebration. Fires blazed high into the night, music filled the air, and for the first time in years, the tribe celebrated without the shadow of fear hanging over them. Wade stood at the edge of the camp, away from the noise, looking out over the river of promise. The water shimmered silver under the moonlight. His heavy wool coat was finally off, replaced by a soft buckskin shirt the elders had given him. He felt light. He felt anchored. He heard soft footsteps on the grass. Senna stepped up beside him, the turquoise beads in her hair catching the firelight. She didn't stand apart from him this time. She stood close, the warmth of her shoulder pressing gently against his arm. "I spent my whole life hating this river," Senna whispered, looking at the water, hating the tradition that said I had no choice in who I would love. Wade turned to her, his hazel eyes searching her face. "And now?" Senna reached up, her fingers gently tracing the rough, wind-burned line of his jaw. "Now, I think the river knew exactly what it was doing." She leaned in, and as their lips met, the harshness of the desert, the violence of the frontier, and the lonely miles of Wade's past simply washed away. He had walked into the freezing water, a lost man with an empty canteen. He walked out with a family, a purpose, and a love that was stronger than the Arizona stone. The wrong river had led him to the exact right home. In a world that forces us to be hard, there is nothing more beautiful than the moment a weary heart finds a safe place to finally rest. Sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't born from poetry, but from the quiet actions of a protector who refuses to walk away when the storm hits. If you believe that true strength is found in staying, and that every broken soul deserves a home, share this story with someone you hold dear.